Give me a second. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Christian Flores. Today we have, give me a second, Dean McMurray. How are you doing, Dean?
Hey, I'm doing good, Christian. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you for coming on. So tell us about yourself, Dean.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we went live, like I was saying, grew up in northern Minnesota. Really consider myself a small town kid. Um, you know, very blue collar parents, very simple upbringing, and went right into the military right after high school, and went on to serve, 14 and a half years with the regular army, in various positions and jobs. And then in 2003, after Afghanistan, I decided to get out of the active army component. And then I actually went over to the Army National Guard in a full-time capacity. So I was working, Monday through Friday as a full-time support folk, in one of the armories. And then 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year, I was playing army with the rest of them. And I went out and I did that for another 10 years. And then I retired, with a total of 24 years of service. And that was, and that was, geez, that was what, 10 years, 10, 11 years ago. So it's been kind of crazy how time flies. And one of the things with that is when I joined, one of my last deployments was to Kosovo, the country of Kosovo, for a peacekeeping mission. And it was right after that deployment is when I had my what I call my spiritual awakening. One of the things that I didn't share with you is that I'm a psychic medium. And a lot of people always say, well, how did you go from being in the military to a psychic medium? And it wasn't something that I was asking for. I thought, ooh, that looks cool on TV. Let me do that. I didn't want it. I didn't want to do it. And it wasn't something I was seeking. I wasn't even open to like paranormal shows or, going back in time. There really wasn't a lot on TV at that time. And quite honestly, after my deployment to Kosovo, when I came home, it was like all holy hell started breaking loose in my home. And what I mean by that, Christian, is where clocks and pictures quite literally started flying off the wall. And I was like, holy crap, like what's going on? Like I want to answer to what's happening. And like I think most people, at first I was trying to put everything within logic. You'd look at it, oh, maybe I didn't, the wife wanted me to hang something, and then all of a sudden it flies off. And maybe I didn't have the drywall anchor in, or I didn't have a nail in the stud or something. And there was a lot of times where some of that fit that picture, but the majority of the time it didn't. And it was kind of interesting because when I would look at it and try to put logic to what was going on, more often than not, I was like, well, that shouldn't have came off. There was no way that, you would have to lift up and, pull it out. So there's, you start thinking about it logically, and there's, it defied logic. And I wanted answers. I wanted to know, what exactly is happening and why is it happening. And we had a local psychic from the area come over to our home at the time. And my wife had been kind of seeing her for some readings and other stuff with girlfriends. And I always joked with her about it because I was jokingly referring to the psychic as the Voodoo Chick, right? Because I didn't understand it. And quite honestly, it freaked me out a little bit. And it was easier for me personally to poke fun and, make light of something I didn't understand. And so I quite honestly said, get Voodoo Chick on the phone, have her come over, and maybe she can do something, right? And so she came over, and quite honestly, she started connecting to my deceased grandfather, who, by the way, was a World War One veteran. And nothing against my grandpa. I mean, a wonderful man, but we weren't like super close. And, I was kind of like, why is grandpa showing up? And here she is giving me this reading. And I said, well, where was, and she's telling me that he was here supporting me after my deployment, coming back from my deployment. I was like, well, where was he after? And then I go through my list of deployments through the 24 years of service, thinking, hey, why are you just coming at the end? Because now I'm getting ready to retire. Like, I'm pulling the plug. I'm done with deployments and all that stuff. And she said, well, I can't answer that, but I can tell you that, he's here now supporting you. And, as I shared before, that I wasn't in the mind frame or in the space to really accept a message from him. And so I lost all that information that she was giving me. And nothing changed, Christian. Nothing changed as far as, activity, all this, clocks and pictures coming off the wall. And it only actually got more active. And until one night I was washing bottles, which oddly enough, I still remember back, it was around midnight. And I don't know why I was up at midnight washing bottles, but everybody else in bed, everybody else was in bed. My newborn son, my daughter who was 6, my wife, everybody's in bed. And here I am washing bottles, and all of a sudden I had this creeped out feeling like somebody's standing behind me. And, of course, you turn around and I don't see anything physically, but I knew that my grandmother, was with me. And my grandmother, by the way, died back in the 80s. So I was around 10. And I was like, why is she showing up now? And I started having a kind of a conversation with myself. Like, how do I know it's grandma? And because I didn't know, I didn't know what I didn't know, number one. And number two, it was more about, I was like, how all of a sudden do I just know that it's grandma? Like, she's, for all I know that she died back in the 80s. How can she be here? And so I'm having this kind of, trying to conceptualize what's going on and understand it. And little did I know it was all these claircognizant abilities and different things coming to the surface in a blink of the eye. But so I thought, you know what, I'm overthinking things. I'm tired. Let me go to bed. And I go to bed, laying there with my eyes closed, but I'm very much awake. And I think it's normal, Christian, for most people to go, if they miss somebody or if they kind of know or think they're with them in spirit, to be like, we start talking to them like, hey, how you been? I miss you. I love you. And, and I was doing that only one way. I wasn't receiving anything at that point. And, kind of like, grandma, if you're really here, that was my ego part going, if you're really here, let's just put all this BS to rest. Prove it. Prove that you're here. And it was immediate temperature change. Like you walked out in the, if you were in Canada, think of if you're in Canada in February. I mean, absolutely frigid in the bedroom, like immediate. And it was like, holy crap, like I could feel that. But then, of course, my brain starts going, that could be a lot of things, Dean. Maybe the wife's got the window cracked. You got a fan on, maybe. And then I thought, you know what? If she could touch me, that's something so visceral that I can't deny that. I can't deny what I feel. And so, I still remember it like was yesterday, Christian. It was, a gentle yet firm pressure that started at the top of my head, went to the bottom of my feet. And it wasn't like she was choking me like you will believe. It wasn't, anything. It was just a gentle pressure, like if you think of my body becoming heavier than lead, and I could actually feel and hear my body compress into the mattress slowly. And I was like, holy crap, like what's going on? And it started freaking me out because I was like, oh my God, I broke the fifth seal to hell. Who are the, how do you shut it off? Like and it was like the 6-year-old little boy in me came out, and I was like, you know what, Grandma, love you, but I'll see you soon, but you gotta need to leave. And as soon as I said that, everything, like in a blink of an eye or snap of your fingers, everything returned to normal. There was no more weight on me. The room returned to normal temperature. And I'm sitting up in bed now, out of breath, completely covered in sweat, going, oh my God, am I having some type of psychosis moment or whatever? And my wife, I mentioned that we had a newborn. My wife has um, never was a deep sleeper, never has been. But in this one point in time, she slept like she has never slept in her life, right? And I'm trying to wake her up, like, there's somebody here. Like I'm just trying to process everything that went on. And she's thinking somebody's breaking in. And I'm like, no, that would be easy to understand or wrap your head around. Like, you can respond or understand a physical threat or anything, right? That, if I have my iPhone here, that's something tangible. But how do you conceptualize like spirits? And it's like, talking about feelings. And I said, no, there's somebody here, like a spirit. And she was like looking at me like, how do you know that? And I said, right, I don't know. I said, you need to get a hold of Voodoo Chick, the psychic, to come over. And so really kind of interesting that that was really the, I call it the come to Jesus moment. And to, because I needed something so visceral, so I couldn't deny it. And I knew from that moment, like, I didn't know how to explain it, but I knew that even if nobody ever from that point on ever believed me, that was okay, because I couldn't deny what I experienced. That was a real, and I was like, wow, that was, I may not have all the words of the explanations. And that started my spiritual journey of going, I need to figure this out. And it was really kind of fascinating. And I reached back out to that local psychic. She was the only one that I knew at the time that I was like, frame of reference. And I said, I need to figure out why this is all happening to me. Here I am in my last 3 years of military service. I was in my early 40s. My kids are super young. And I knew that, dad's got to go on and continue doing work. And my plan was retire from the military and then move on and work for the Veterans Administration, and, continue working. I thought, hey, that'd be a great follow on, job, and they help veterans and all that great stuff. And that wasn't the universe's plan, because, if I knew at the time, because I had it all planned out in my head. But they always say, when man plans, God laughs. And, somebody was really laughing because, somebody's like, oh, that's cute, he's planning to do all this. And, even though there was a part of it that was right, because I did go on to, work with veterans and their families, and of course, everybody else as well. But the thing that I would share is that, it's, completely looked completely different. And when I retired, to know that, it was just very natural for me to say, yeah, I'm going to be a professional full-time psychic medium. That was just like alien words coming out of my mouth. And I got to share, like, in that time between me kind of figuring out, like on this spiritual journey, that psychic told me, like, Dean, you're a medium. And I was like, you're full of, what? And she said, you know what, I probably am, but she goes, you're still a medium. And I said, and I was trying to think, like, what does that even mean? You know, I know what it means, the definition. I knew that mediums, you know, communicate with those that are crossed or deceased. But I was like, what does that look like for Dean McMurray? Like, you know, there was only a few on TV at the time. There was a ton of books. There's, you know, going back 10 years or so, 10, 11 years. And so I started consuming a lot. Like, you know, what does that mean? What does that? And, you know, you read the stories and it's very heartwarming and inspiring. But I was like, that's their experience, not mine. And I was like, so what does that look like for me? I was like, and then I jokingly said, kind of to the heavens, like, ooh, am I going to be giving readings in my basement? Or, and I really believe that somebody up in heaven was going, yeah, you will. And in your garage and in Ubers, and you're going to be, you know, wherever you're asked to show up, you know, and that's where you'll go. And, you know, like I said, I've been doing this now. It's kind of crazy to say, for a decade. And it's very it's rewarding work and very humbling work, because you get to be in the presence of so much healing, and also just some, I guess, events and things that you never would have even fathomed, and whatever that looks like. There's been, and you know, I get to you know, be great on great shows like yours, and you know, everything from, you know, syndicated shows to everything, you know, TV and everything else. So it opens doorways, but yet at the same time, it's first and foremost, it's always been, because I didn't know what I wanted to do with mediumship. And I was like, I didn't even know if I wanted to pursue it, because I didn't want to be, as I shared earlier, I didn't want it because I was like, I wasn't looking for it. And the aspect of going, you know, going within and going, okay, well, why are you in the military? And it was, well, it kind of to be part of something bigger than myself, and to help, you know, others. And that's the way, you know, the reason, kind of like at a bigger picture. And when I sat with it, I was like, oh wow, like mediumship is essentially the same thing for me. And so kind of my mission statement has always been from the beginning to help others heal one connection at a time. And whatever that is, I can show up and just hold space for somebody, or you know, whether it's connecting to a loved one, or it might be something completely far and away. And over the, you know, the course of time, you know, you have so many different experiences that you know, it's just like, wow, did I just, you know, I just got to experience that in the short time that I was with that individual. And so, you know, there's a lot of beautiful things out there, and a lot of challenging things, a lot of sad things. And, you know, so you have to see the, you know, if you get into this work, it's seeing the contrast and dealing with both, because it's not always, I always say, you know, puppies and unicorns. It's not always, as people like to say in the new agey term, you know, peace, light, and love. It's not always fuzzy. It's sometimes it's, you know, sometimes it's ugly. So, and not that it's bad, it's just, you know, not always pretty. So, if that makes sense. But in a sense, that's, you know, and I always kind of go back, people, you know, people ask me, Dean, who are you? And I always usually say, well, at first, that's a big can of worms, but um, you know, I still consider myself the small town kid from northern Minnesota that, you know, just decided to serve his country for, you know, the first half of his adult life, and then, you know, kind of stumbled into mediumship. And so,
Okay. First off, I want to say thank you for the for your service, the 24 years.
yes, thank you.
Also, like, did you ever figure out like why your grandparents were there?
Yeah, the thing that that's a great question, is that, kind of in retrospect, I was like, why was it that why was it that my grandfather, my grandpa, actually, that, they were husband and wife, actually. Um, but, and I was kind of asking that because I thought that's kind of interesting you showed up. And truly, I feel, looking back and trying to remember bits and pieces of that first reading that I ever got, was, it was to, welcome me home in a sense, but to appeal to me as a veteran to a veteran. I think about the trauma that, my grandfather was a farrier. He took care of the horses during World War I. And regardless of what somebody's job was, I just think, or regardless of what they did, I just think of the hardships and the horrors that they experienced during that period. And, I think about, as, kind of connecting to me from veteran to veteran. And when I looked also at it, because I was like, there's got to be something deeper. I felt that there was a deeper connection, and I kept on, like, being told or shown that it was almost like a ending and a beginning of cycles. And it made a lot of sense, because here I was in the last 3 years of my military service. So I was getting ready to end 24 years, which made up, again, my, first half of my adult life, like, going, wow, that's a lot of years. And then also on the aspect that the last of, my children were born. So, and here, we just had my son, and here he was, a newborn. So there was a lot of things ending, but then always with the ending, regardless of what it is, there's always a new beginning, right? And so this new chapter was opening, and I think that's where why my grandmother stepped in, because she was somebody that I had a very close relationship with growing up, and knew that, it would be somebody in the spiritual realm that I could connect with. She knew that even though I wasn't all aware of all my abilities at that point, or didn't even know really what they were, or whatever, that essentially I would be able to tell in an instant what grandma felt like being in her presence, because I remember that as a child. Like, I spent a lot of time there. And so, if you think about it, if you have a significant other, or a mom, grandpa, grandma, whomever, that when you're in the same, science has shown that, like, we're displacing air molecules, and we're the bodies are communicating through light photons. So there's a vibe, we'll call it, right? We put these different labels on it, but everybody holds a bit, everybody displaces different energy, and so everybody has a different vibe, essentially. And you just kind of get to know that. It's like, you can kind of tell, even though you can see, for most people that have the ability to physically see,
Mhm.
when they're there, but also you can feel it. Like, you can, sometimes it also comes by sense. So, getting back to to answer your question, why do I feel that the people that showed up did, is so it would be, even though it was shocking for me at that time, it would be a gentle immersion into the spirit realm, kind of the come to Jesus moment,
Mhm.
and something that I would immediately identify. Oh, that's grandma. Like, I know without a doubt, like, that's my grandma. And be like, oh, grandma's, not here to hurt me. Like, she always loved me, and, was grandma. And so, that was, that, I guess, going back to that, that's why. That's that's what I've gotten. So, but that's a great question, because it's always kind of interesting, kind of trying to go back and get a retrospect look at it.
All right. So when you are doing something, like, you feel it like immediately, like when you're doing like a spiritual read.
So when I'm doing a reading with a client, I always tell them in the beginning, is the way that the reading works for me is I'll connect to you, connect to spirit stepping forward to communicate with you. Then I'll give you a description of who I'm seeing and sensing. I'll take a brief, then I'll take a brief pause and ask you if that's somebody you can recognize and or validate with. And if you can, beautiful. If you can, I'll go back and get as much information as I can. If you still can't validate with who it is, I will still deliver the message and trust that who it is and their message will make sense a bit down the road. So in a sense, I kind of go, if you want to break it down kind of Barney style, we'll say, is in a sense, I use all my abilities. So this, you think of the two aspects, psychic and medium, is, I do use a lot of feel, like energetic feeling. And then also a lot of in my readings as well as I listen to a lot of archangels. I don't have a big, deep traditional religious background, but I connect to archangels in a deeper way. And so I allow them to come into the reading regardless if somebody connects to angels or not. And it's really kind of crazy, some of the stuff that, the angels share with me. But if you think of the angels kind of above your head, and I kind of work my way down, and, and then I start connecting into the spiritual aspect. But more specifically on your question, yes, do I start feeling a little bit? Yes. However, a lot of times everything comes in my mind's eye on the 99% percentage, I guess. 99% of the time, the images are in my mind. And this is called mental medium, where things are in your, you think of pictures and movies playing in your mind, and where you're just saying, okay, I see, I'm being shown this, or oh my God, she's handing me, maybe it's specific flowers, or it could be like sometimes a jewelry box or a pocket watch, or maybe a motorcycle. I have one time, this grandfather was stepping forward and he was covered in grease, and I could see cars around him, like working on cars, but he was also like playing a organ, and kind of like dancing a polka jig or whatever. And like, oh, and I called him the organ playing mechanic, and she was like, oh my God, that's my grandpa. And because he had that, he loved to play like an organ, like a squeeze box, right? So people come from all walks of life, and so that's the thing. It's like a lot of times it's hard for people that first start, because you think you're making it up, like, why am I getting this? And and I always have learned, or I learned very early on, not to question what I'm getting, even if it sounds absolutely absurd. And case in point, I was at a public reading or gallery, and I was asking prior in my head for spirit to step forward so I could start things off. And this little old lady in spirit stepped forward, and she grabbed my hand, and she was like, and she was so sweet. And she goes, oh, Dean, she said, you just bring up the family story about the baked beans and fruit salad. And I was like, what? And she was like, just bring it up. And I was like, okay. And I said, I said, I don't know who can recognize or validate, this lady. And I described her. And I said, she's telling me about a family joke or story about baked beans and fruit salad. And there was this younger lady, she kind of goes like this, like she didn't want to raise her hand. And because it was the very first reading, and she was like, she didn't want to be the first one. And she kind of goes like this. And I was like, who can can you validate who this is? She goes, that lady is very clearly my grandmother. And I said, well, what's going on with the baked beans and the fruit salad? She keeps on talking about that. And she goes, I'm not quite sure about the baked beans, but she goes, the fruit salad, she's very clearly talking about my aunt who's still living. So every family function, she makes fruit salad. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty common, And I was like, so what's the family joke? Like everybody's wondering, like, what's the big deal? And she goes, well, when she makes it, she makes a big thing of it, and then she waters it all down, and I'm like, what, like, okay, everybody's wondering, like, why does she water it all? Well, she thinks it's diet when she, it makes it better for you. And so, of course, everybody is just laughing their ass off. And, it was just, and so it was something that I was like, I was like, either, when this older lady I'm like, either I'm going to be in the laughing stock and people are thinking I'm crazy, or like, and totally it was just kind of just like, how can you make that shit up, right? And I was like, who would have thought, like, fruit salad? And I always think about that because it's something so odd, and there's so many like cool like stories about just people coming through with stuff, and it's just like, wow, it's but I don't know if that, I feel that I might have got off on a tangent, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Um, I have like 5 minutes left, but I was gonna ask, does it feel rewarding when you do it? Like, do you like feel like?
Oh, absolutely. I'll be the first to say, obviously, I do this full time, so it is a business. There is a business aspect to what I do. However, the the reward that I get far exceeds anything monetarily that I ever receive. As far as connecting and being able to help people in a bigger way, and however that is, whether that's with mediumship or or any other way that I'm able to. And it absolutely is. It's been something that fills my heart. I wouldn't continue doing it, quite honestly, if it wasn't reward, like, it makes you feel good. It's like, and a lot of times when I wake up, I'm like, I wonder how I'm going to be asked to serve today. Because when you're open to serving humanity, really, and I think we could all do this, ask, how can I serve today? How can I show up? Is it just to help a friend? Is it maybe help a lady pay for milk for kids? Or is it to connect to a deceased loved one? Is it to help shift energy around something, or just sit to be a great listener? It could be a lot of things. However, it's just being open to the process. And that's what I'd encourage, Christian. That's what I'd encourage all your listeners. If we could wake up every day, and it doesn't have to be a religious or spiritual thing, but just asking, how can I serve today? How can I serve my fellow man and the men and women around me in my community, or the world? How can I show up today? How can I serve today? Is it just to be give a smile? Is it to give a compliment? Can I help somebody out? And it doesn't always have to be monetarily. Could I give of my time of services, or just smile? Little kindness goes a long way. There's so many people hurting. Just being kind and nice speaks volumes. So
I agree. I agree. I definitely have to do another episode because there's a lot of questions I didn't really have.
absolutely, I'd love to connect again.
But how can someone find you?
Well, you can either find me on Facebook, Instagram, most every social media platform at the Military Medium, or on the web. Of course, you can go to the militarymedium.com, deanmcmurray.com. Just search, it'll pop up. And there's options to give me shoot me an email. If you got questions, you can book readings. I got a bunch of different services on the web. And then a lot of different things coming up, shows, events. They're always being processed. Facebook, Instagram are usually a couple big ones where I continually update things as I book them or as I schedule things. So, and I know that I have another virtual online gallery, which is readings through Zoom, coming up here in June. So I believe I want to say June 4th, but I could be wrong on that. But Facebook has the event, and I think tickets are only $30. So, so if anybody's interested in that, they can check that out.
All right. If you can like send me a link and I will post it in the bio.
Hey, great. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, and just once again, thank you. We definitely have to do it again because there's a few questions that came in my mind.
Yeah.
But
For sure.
thank you for coming on, and you have a good day.
All right, Christian, thank you so much. And you have a good day as well.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.